Hey guys, so today I'm here with the Rubicon Express 2.5-inch Super Ride lift kit fitting all 2018 and up JL Wranglers. So lifting your Wrangler can offer you a number of different benefits. First off, performance, and then you always have aesthetics. This option by Rubicon Express is going to do just that by helping you conquer those trails and also turning some heads with a badass and aggressive stance out of your JL. So what I do really like about this kit is that it is a pretty bare bones lift kit. This is going to come with coils, sway bar end links, and bump stop extensions instead of a lot of other components that you would see in other standard lift kits. I do really like that because it is perfect for the beginner. It's perfect for somebody who's looking to build off of this lift kit and add some different suspension components that they would prefer over getting a lift kit that all comes together. So what I would recommend out of this lift kit is a set of shock extensions. Now you can see that we have some bolted up behind us. This is an option by ProComp that we do offer on our site, and I would highly recommend if you are using your factory shocks to bolt up a set of shock extensions just to accommodate for that extra 2.5 inches of lift. And I would have liked to have seen that out of this kit, but like I said, it's a bare bones lift kit and it's going to get you started and it's going to get the height on your Wrangler that you may be looking for. So as far as lift height goes, as well as tire size, this kit is rated to fit comfortably a 35-inch tire for the Sahara as well as the Sport model, and for the Rubicon model, comfortably a 37-inch tire, and that's because of that raised fender flare. So 33-inch tires are going to look a little bit small on this, however you are going to get a lot more room for up travel in your wheel well, and 37s on the Sahara as well as the Sport models are going to be a little bit tight. You may get some rubbing from wheel lock to wheel lock, however you still will be able to fit them. So this is going to be a very affordable lift kit at roughly $350, and like I said before, that's just because it's going to be a pretty bare bones kit. Now, it still is Rubicon Express. You are getting quality parts, and I definitely do think that you are getting what you pay for out of this kit. Now, more expensive options are obviously just going to come with more components. They may come with track bar relocation brackets, shocks, as well as track bars. They may come with different control arms, as well as just different components that are going to jack that price up. Now, like I said, I think this is perfect for the beginner. I think it's perfect to build off of, which means it's perfect for the price. So install is going to be a 3 out of 3 wrenches on the difficulty meter. You're going to need a number of different hand tools, as well as 6 hours worth of your time if you're looking to do it in your driveway. So speaking of the install, let's jump into that now.
The tools that I used for my install were a die grinder, a dead blow, a pair of vice grips, a pry bar, a 1/2-inch drill bit, an assortment of wrenches and ratchets, an assortment of sockets, a 6mm and 8mm Allen key, an extension, safety glasses, a control arm, knockout tool, and an assortment of impacts and a drill. So the first step to our install is just to get our Jeep up in the air. Now, if you have a lift like we do, we're going to throw it up on our lift. However, if you're doing this on the ground with a jack and jack stands, we are going to start in the front, so chock your rear wheels and jack up the front. Now we can go ahead and remove our wheels. I'm using a 22mm deep socket and my air impact wrench. So first things first, we do have to support our front axle. So I'm going to grab some pole jacks and just go ahead and do that. So now we can start by removing our sway bar links. So I am going to use an 18mm wrench and an 18mm socket to remove that bottom bolt. Now we have to do the other bolt to swing this up and out of the way so we can remove that top nut. So now we can remove our other bottom bolt for our sway bar link. Now there will be a flag nut on the other side, so you'll just need an 18mm socket. I'm also using a breaker bar because I can't get my impact wrench in here. So I'm just going to break that loose real quick, and then we can go ahead and take our hand ratchet to it. Now we can get these out of the way and bring our sway bar down just a hair so we can go ahead and access our top stud. So what we need to do at this point is take our 18mm wrench as well as a 6mm Allen key And then we can go ahead and remove that top stud. After our one sway bar is removed, we can move to the other side. So next we can remove our lower shock bolt. This is going to allow our axle to sag. We're not actually replacing our shocks in this kit, but we do need to get our axle low enough to take out our springs. So I'm going to be using an 18mm socket and 18mm wrench to do that. So before we drop our axle down, and while we're already on this side, what I want to do is just disconnect this one bracket that's holding our brake line. This is just going to allow it a little bit more slack, and then if we do see that this is getting maxed out, we can come back and disconnect any other brackets that may be keeping that tension. So I'm using a 15mm socket. I'm just going to go ahead and remove this bolt. Slide this bracket off. That's just going to give us enough slack. We will remove this bracket if need be. You may have to put a little bit of pressure on your axle. Make sure you watch your lift points when you do this. However, this is basically just maxed out, but it is pulling upward, so it is putting pressure on this bolt. So what we're going to do next is remove our track bar bolt. You're going to be using a 21mm socket. I'm also going to use an extension to clear our drag link here. This is just going to allow our axle to drop a little bit farther. So what we're going to do now is just start to lower our axle. Make sure that you keep an eye on your brake lines. I didn't want to disconnect all of the brackets at first. I wanted to see what is going to hold us up in order to drop our axle. So just make sure you are watching those. So now that we have our axle lowered enough, what we're going to do now is just remove our spring. Do the same thing on the other side. So what we're going to do next is install our spring as well as our bump stop spacer. So what we're going to do is put the spacer inside of our spring and then put it around and set it into place. So I'm going to put the spacer inside because we will have to secure that down in just a second. But then we're just going to put the spring into place. So now we're going to shift the spring into position. So after your spring is aligned with your factory retainer, we're going to secure down our bump stop extension with our provided hardware. Now this is going to be 2 flat washers, a bolt, as well as a nylon lock nut. So I'm going to tighten this down with a 9/16 inch socket and 9/16 inch open-ended wrench. So before I go ahead and install this second spring, I did want to show you guys a side-by-side comparison in height in comparison to your factory spring. Now this is what's going to give you all of the height out of this kit. You are getting 2.5 inches of lift for your JL.
Now these are also going to carry over the comfortability aspect because they are a quality spring. These are tuned for bump compliance as well as load handling, so these are still going to be very comfortable, and that's expected from Rubicon Express because they are a quality brand. Now there's not really much to talk about here, so let's go ahead and install this new spring. So in order to secure our bump stop spacer down, we need to remove our brake line bracket on the back of our spring perch. We do have the track bar bracket in the front, so it's not going to be very easily accessible from the front. However, if we just remove this, we will be able to access that a lot easier. So I'm just going to take a 10mm socket, remove this bolt that's holding on this bracket. So once that bolt's removed, we'll be able to wedge this out, and we can just place that there. So then we'll be able to access from the rear. So what we're going to do next is secure down our bump stop spacer. So now that we're finished attaching our bump stop spacer, we can just reattach our brake line bracket. So all you have to do is just slide that pin back in, and then we can reconnect our bolt. So what we're going to do next is punch out the tabs for our control arm so we can adjust our caster in the future. Now I'm going to use a 21mm socket to remove the bolt on the bolt head side, and then a 24mm or 15/16 inch wrench on the nut side. You also want to make sure that you do this one control arm at a time. Whenever you're replacing control arms, you always want to make sure that all the links are connected besides the one that you're working on. So now that we have our control arm out of the way, what we need to do is punch out these tabs so we can insert a cam bolt and then adjust our caster. The caster is basically how your axle rolls. So we are just going to put our tool in there so we can punch out these tabs. Now we can take a 21mm socket. It may differ depending on your tool, but we're going to go ahead and impact that so we can pull our tool through to punch these tabs out. So we're just going to continue that process right down the line. So now we can reinstall our control arm with our cam washers. Now we are using the factory control arm, so it needs to be 1.5 positive or more positive caster than our factory spec. So if we position our washer with the skinniest part facing the rear, basically the hole facing the rear, then we'll go back to a factory spec with stock control arms. So we're going to take our new cam bolts, our flat washers, as well as our cam washers. Push that through, making sure that our washer is at least flush. When the axle's down on its own weight, it'll actually roll to where it's supposed to be. And we can take our other cam washer. You should have 2 cam washers per bolt or per control arm, our flat washer and our nut. So I'm going to go ahead and snug that up. We're not going to tighten it down just yet because we want to do that while the Jeep is on its own weight. I'm going to use a 24mm socket and a 5/16 inch wrench in order to do that.
Again, we just want to make sure that it's on there and connected. And then we can do the same thing on the other side. So to actually get this out of the way, I just loosen up the top bolt just a hair so we can slide this down. So we need to punch out these tabs here. We're going to stick our tab punch out tool in our control arm mount and make sure that everything is lined up evenly. You can rent these at a local auto parts store. You're going to take a 22mm socket and tighten that until it pulls through. So after we punch out our tabs, we're just going to make this surface flush so we can put our cam washer on, and it sits between our two tabs here. Now we do need to also make sure that the bolt is able to move back and forth, so I'm just going to take a die grinder and grind this all flat, as well as make sure that the bolt will fit. So for our passenger side control arm mount, the inside hole will be blocked by our sensor here mounted up to our axle. So we're going to flip our tool around, and we are just going to use a 22mm wrench. You're going to need some leverage, and we'll be able to punch that out by hand. Now that we've cleaned up our tabs, we can go ahead and insert our cam bolt. You want to make sure that your cam washer is facing 1.5 degree more positive. So when you bolt your shocks in, what's going to happen if you don't have extensions or if you don't have new shocks? Your stock shocks will be maxed out because they are not accommodated to that height. They're not made for that 2.5 inches of extra lift, so the valving will be maxed out. So what we're going to do is go ahead and install these shock extensions to make sure that we are accommodating for that extra lift height. Now I would really like to see this out of this lift kit, however, they are not 100% needed. You still can bolt them up, however, I highly recommend that you do not. It's going to be a lot more comfortable if you have that accommodation there, and you definitely don't want to blow out a shock. What we can do next is bolt up our sway bar end links. These are going to be new. These are going to be able to accommodate for that extra height. Now you are going to have two different types of sway bar links. The straight ones are going to be in the front, and the ones with a slight bend in them are going to be for the rear. So we are going to have new sway bar end link top hardware.
And then we're gonna go ahead and reuse the lower hardware from the factory. Now before we go ahead and tighten these down, I do want to connect both sides, make sure everything's lining up properly. So for our bottom hardware, we are going to be tightening that up with an 18mm socket. Now for the top, I'm going to be using a 19mm socket and 19mm wrench. Now we can do the same thing on the other side. Now our last step before moving to the rear is just to reconnect our brake line brackets on our control arm here. We're going to reuse our factory hardware and tighten that down with a 15mm socket. Do the same thing on the other side. Now we can start disassembling the rear. So the first step to disassembling our rear is just to support our rear axle. Then we can go ahead and disconnect our sway bar links as well as our shocks. So to make it easier to access our sway bar, I'm just going to disconnect the bottom of our shock first. I'm going to be using an 18mm socket and an 18mm wrench. Same thing for the other side. Now we can disassemble our sway bar links. I'm going to be using the same 18mm socket and 18mm wrench to disconnect the lower sway bar end link bolt. I'm going to do that same thing on the other side, and then we're going to lower our sway bar so we can access our top bolt a little bit easier. Now we can pull our sway bar down, being careful of our brake lines. We just want to make it a little bit easier accessible. So now we can take off the top sway bar end length nut. I'm going to be using an 18mm wrench for the nut, and then to keep the stud still, I need to use a 6mm Allen key. After that nut is off, we can pop out our sway bar end link and do the same thing on the other side. After our sway bars are disconnected, we can start to lower our axle, keeping an eye on all of our brake lines. Now we're just going to drop our axle, keeping an eye on it, making sure that everything looks even. Also keeping an eye on our brake lines as well,
We do not want to stress those out. As you can tell, we already have enough space to take out our factory springs. We want to make sure that we keep our isolators though. So after we have our axle lowered as far as possible, what we're going to do is pop in our new springs. We do need to use that factory isolator like I mentioned before, so make sure you have that and we'll be able to pop this in over our spring perch. So since I was able to get in front of the spring over on the passenger side, it was very easy to get the actual spring in over the spring perch. Now on this side, we do have our track bar in the way and we do kind of have a weird angle on getting that new spring in. So in order to get that in, we need to drop our axle a little bit more. So we need to relieve our track bar. So I'm gonna use a 21mm socket and go ahead and remove this bolt so we're able to drop our axle a little bit lower. So once that's disconnected, make sure you grab that flag nut. Save that for later when we reconnect it. So now we can continue to drop our axle. Again, make sure you are watching your brake lines. We want to make sure that those stay safe. So we are going to remove our brake line bracket just so we can get a little bit more drop. We're going to be using a 10mm socket and an impact wrench in order to take that out. Just going to unhook it from our frame. That should give us a little bit of leeway when it comes to dropping our axle. So what we need to do now is put in our bump stop extension. We are going to install this with the tab facing the rear of the vehicle. So we're going to lay that over our bump stop pad, take our provided hardware and secure that down. There's going to be a hole in the front as well as the rear. So after your bump stop extensions are secure, you can move on to assembling your new shocks or your shock extensions. So before we go ahead and attach our shocks, we do need to attach our sway bar end lengths just to make sure that we have enough room to do so. But first, we're gonna need to drill out our sway bar. We need to drill it out to a 1/2 inch in order for our new hardware to fit. So you're gonna need a 1/2 inch drill bit and a drill, and we can go ahead and drill that out. What we're going to do now is connect our sway bar end links after we've drilled out our sway bar. Now, the curve is going to depend on what wheel you have, and how you attach it is going to depend on the wheel that you have. So since we are running our factory wheels on this, our factory 17-inch wheel, we are going to have that curve bent on the inside and mount this up on the inside of our sway bar. Now, if you have aftermarket wheels with 4.5 inches of back spacing or less, we're going to bolt it up to the outside. So since we are running factory wheels, we're going to go ahead and bolt this up here with our new hardware that we are provided. Now we can connect the bottom. So after they're both attached, we can go ahead and tighten those down using our 18mm socket and wrench.
Now we can tighten down the top bolt with an 8mm Allen key and a 19mm wrench.
All right, now we can address our shocks.
So now that the shock extensions are attached, I was trying to reconnect our shocks. However, our axle was not able to be compressed enough while it's up on the lift in order to do so. So I'm gonna have to drop it on its own weight in order to do that, as well as to reconnect the front and the rear track bars. So right now, we're just gonna go ahead and reconnect our brake lines, and then we can throw our tires on and do that. Now you can just do the other side. So now that we have our Jeep down on our own weight, we're gonna go ahead and reconnect our shock. As you can see, it lines up a lot better than it did while it was in the air, now that the axle is compressed. We're also going to tighten down our shock extensions, or if you have new shocks, you should be able to just bolt them in and tighten them down. So I did leave this loose just because we want to make sure that everything is attached before we go ahead and tighten anything down. Now these are actually offered on our website. These shock extensions are one of the only ones that we offer by ProComp. So if you are looking into getting this lift kit, this is definitely a great option. They're a lot cheaper than buying new shocks. However, this lift kit leaves it pretty open to do whatever you really want to with your shock. So while we're back here, we're gonna go ahead and line up our track bar and bolt it in. Now ours lines up perfectly while it's sitting on its own weight. What you can also do if it's not lined up is just have someone push on the side of the Jeep, and you'll be able to wiggle the back end of the Jeep to get it to line up that way. Now with our 21mm socket, we can go ahead and tighten that down.
So we will have to torque everything to spec, but now we can go up to the front and attach our front track bar.
So what we're going to do now is bolt up our front track bar. Now, as you can see, it is not lining up. However, what you can do to get it to line up is have somebody sit in the driver's seat and turn the steering wheel back and forth until it does. So turning the steering wheel left and right will be able to get the axle to the position where we need it to be, and we'll be able to stick our bolt through, take our factory flag nut, put that on the other side. Now with a 21mm socket and an extension, we can go ahead and tighten down that track bar bolt.
So now I'm going to tighten down our control arms while the Jeep's on its own weight. I'm going to use a 15/16 inch wrench and a 24mm socket.
So that's going to wrap it up for my review and install. Make sure you like and subscribe, guys. And for more videos like this, keep it right here at ExtremeTerrain.com.